All right. So a slightly smaller turnout than last week, and I have a feeling this absolutely beautiful weather might have something to do with it. So for those of you who are here right now, I appreciate you coming out. My hope is, like last week, when you leave today, you have some specific ideas and some specific suggestions that will help you prevent a panic attack on your first science exam. For those of you who weren't here last week, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Michael Schumann. I'm the interim director of our Learning Assistance Center here at Wake. And we have partnered up Dr.Cardi, who's also from our office. We partnered up with two faculty members from biology and from chemistry to provide this three-part workshop because we're committed to helping students figure out how they can not only learn to take tests a little bit better, but also manage the performance anxiety about taking tests that so many students seem to experience. Last week's workshop focused more specifically on preparing for the exam, right? And in fact, what I'd like to do is just ask, by show of hands, how many of you were here last week? Okay, excellent. Could you tell me a little bit, maybe if I could come up with 2 or 3 things that you took away from last week or things that you remember? Yes. Yeah, to be more active, more hands-on with learning, not just reading textbooks. That's great. How about 2 more things you took away from last week? Yep.
Don't study in your dorms.
Yeah, don't study in the dorms. That's a great one. And one more. Yes?
Self-test.
Yep. Practicing and self-testing is the best way to prepare for your exams. And then the second half of last week's workshop focused on introducing the idea of learning how to manage that anxiety that we feel when we have to perform. So today we're going to continue with what was introduced last week, talk to you more specifically about ways to manage that anxiety when you're actually taking the test. So today's workshop is all about taking the test. In the second half of today, we'll hear from Dr. Wren, who's going to focus more specifically on the test-taking experience. And then finally, after you've already taken your first science exam, which will be in 2 weeks, we'll have a workshop that's called Analyzing the Exam. So it'll be an opportunity for us to talk about what was it like taking your first exam. Dr. Lord is going to be leading that particular workshop, and she's arranged to have a panel of students who were in your place just a few years ago talking about what their experience was like as a first-year student and now looking at where they are. So I hope you'll find it to be really helpful. So what I wanted to start today's workshop off with is a study that Dr. Cardi and I just recently learned about, which is a real fascinating study on performance anxiety. So I passed out some cards when you walked in the class. I'd like for, if you have a card, and there are 15 of you, if you have a card, if you could come to the front of the class. And if you're coming this way, be careful, we have a camera right here. Y'all can just line up in a row. So what this study tells us is that performing musical numbers, whether it's singing or whether it's dancing, is an effective way to manage stress, right? And so Dr. Cardi and I thought it might be really helpful to see if this works, right? So my hope is that, and of course you are capable of doing this, we're going to spend some time coming up with a musical number that you'll be singing and dancing. Actually, what I'll have you do is I want you to give this card to someone else. And they're going to be the ones doing the performance. All right? Now, when you give them the card, there's to be no discussion. If you get a card, you're up here. You're the one who's going to be doing the performing. Okay? So go find someone to give your card to. They come down here, and we'll set up the performance. No talking. Just pass the card and come on down.
Do we stay up here or do we Alex leave?
All right, there shouldn't be any discussion. Y'all come on down. If you got a card, you're on. right, so while the rest of you are coming down, my hope is that now that you know that you're the ones performing, you were able to think about how to best display your talents, whether you think of yourself as more of a choreographer or more of a singer or a performer, because that's probably the role that you'll want to take on as you put together the routine. And we'll probably do it in groups so that we're able to demonstrate how to manage stress. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, so this isn't an experiment on how dancing and singing influence stress. What it was is an opportunity for you to experience what it might be like to experience some stress. I'm going to let Dr. Cardi, you may have a seat now. You will not have to perform for any of us. Dr. Cardi, take it from here, but thank you for participating.
You want these back?
Sure.
Punked? Is that right? You got punked? Yeah. So let me ask you guys, did you feel any stress? Any anxiety? That was the purpose, right? We want to have you feel it. Because it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually experience it and then figure out, what do I do now? What do I do about it? Because, so I think last week, most of you said you've had times where you're in an exam and you feel stressed and you feel anxious. Is that right? Okay. So how did you feel whenever you thought you were going to have to perform? What was going on? Was your mind sort of like running like, what am I going to do? Yeah? Anyone else? What else were you thinking, feeling?
I really hope that I don't have this on film.
So thank you for sharing what you were thinking, because everybody had thoughts about what was happening. Even if they didn't get picked, they were thinking, oh, don't let it be me, right? Some people wouldn't even look at other people. I mean, some people probably kind of scooched down in their seats as much as they could just so that they weren't put on the spot. So I just want you to notice what you were thinking, because as we talked about last week, the thoughts are a lot of what is driving the anxiety. So you need to be aware of what's happening. All right. Are you still feeling a little anxious? Okay. Well, what I want you to do is I want you to just start sort of paying attention to your body right now. Okay, we know that thoughts are something that's driving the anxiety, but we also, it's helpful to figure out where are we holding the anxiety in our body. So you may just want to kind of look down at the floor, just at a spot, so that you can just focus on your body. If you want to, you can close your eyes. But I want you to just scan your body and notice, where are you feeling the stress? We tend to hold it in the same place all the time. So maybe it's in your throat, maybe in your shoulders, maybe it's in your forehead or your jaws. Maybe you notice it in your legs. All right, do you have a sense of where it is that you are feeling it or felt it? All right, so what I want you to do is, keeping your attention on that spot, you might have a couple spots, but I want you to identify one in particular that feels like that's holding the most stress. And I want you to take a few deep breaths. So breathe in. This is going to be a deep breath. And I want you to put your hand on your stomach and one on your chest. As you take a deep breath in, ideally the hand that's on your stomach is the one that should be moving the most. So take a deep breath in, hold it for maybe 2 counts, and then exhale. And again, breathe in. Notice whether your stomach is the one doing the movement. Up here, you're putting yourself into a sympathetic stress response. So you're going to hold it and then exhale. Every time you exhale, what I want you to think about is that you are relaxing that particular part of your body. Your body should start to feel a little heavier in the seat because you're relaxing. You're not holding. A couple more deep breaths. Hold it. And release. Do you notice anything? Anything different about your body or that particular area? I'm a little suspicious that you may be worried about what are other people thinking about me doing this. Are they watching me? Am I doing it right? This is stupid. Those kinds of thoughts. So I want you to be suspicious of those thoughts because that's the mind and that's the thing that throws you into anxiety. It's trying to get your attention. It wants to be in control. So I want you to be willing to push the mute button. Those thoughts come in, you're willing to just say, not right now. And then you put your attention back where you want to put it. So on scanning the body, relaxing that particular part of your body, taking some deep relaxing breaths, and just focusing on the moment. Remember we talked about that last week too. Being present is going to have you be all in, relaxed, calm, focused. And I imagine, well, I don't know, would you like to take a test like that? Calm, relaxed, and focused? Or anxious, worrying, uptight, stressed out? So just notice. Be willing to notice those thoughts. Push the mute button. You're taking control over again because the mind kind of has probably had its way with you for a while. So I want you to just be willing to take the control back. It doesn't have a say right now. And you don't have to believe everything you hear in your head. That's another important thing to remember. Okay, so was anyone thinking about some of those thoughts whenever we were doing the relaxation? The focusing on your body? Do you notice any difference in your body? What do you notice?
It just feels like less tense.
Did it take long for us to do that? It took longer for me to explain what I wanted you to do. Now imagine if you were like in the exam, you start to notice that you're getting a little distracted and worried about these thoughts. And if you're willing to just let go of the thoughts, take some deep breaths, it could take 30 seconds. And then you can re-engage in the exam, but you're really prepared. Now you're on. You're all in. So there's one more thing I want to suggest that you can try. In addition to the deep breathing, another way to get yourself into the moment is to use all 5 senses. So you might sit back in your chair. Often when we're taking tests, we're sort of like leaning forward, sort of engaged, this kind of thing. If you notice that you're getting tight and you're blanking out, or you just feel like your mind is sort of circling and you can't sort of figure out how to start the process, just lean back for a minute. Sit back in your seat. Take a couple deep breaths. And I want you to use your 5 senses. Think about, what do you hear? I want you to do that right now. What do you hear? If those thoughts come in, just mute them. Get back. Focus here. What do you hear? What do you see? You might identify 1 or 2 things that you see. And I want you to notice them. Color, shape, stationary, moving. Just take it all in. What do you smell? Here's a really easy one, I think. What do you feel?
So I had you do that with your body, but you might also just sort of pay attention to how does it feel to have your back against the back of the seat? How do you feel the floor underneath your feet? So just thinking about that. You may not be eating in the test, so there may not be sort of a, what do you taste? What this does is it grounds you in the moment and gets you back. That's what you want to keep doing, is bring yourself back. Is that helpful? How are you guys feeling right now? Do you feel any different than you did when you were up here? When you thought you were going to have to perform?
Yeah.
So not only did we take the stress away, but do you notice whether any of these techniques that I've just shared with you were helpful at all to just at least bring it down a bit? It's not like it has to wipe it out. Because as we said, a little bit of pressure is good, but we just want to turn it down so that you can actually be effective and efficient, relaxed, calm, and focused. Be here now, be all in. Okay? Awesome. All right. Dr. Wren.
Thank you. Man, I need to have Dr.Cardi come whenever. I'm going to go up next because I'm all nice and relaxed now. So, I don't actually use PowerPoint in my class, so this is always weird. But I just kind of want to have some slides. So my background is in chemistry and chemistry education research. So that's what I did my PhD work in. So I've thought a lot about, and I've read a lot about, what are predictors of success for students in chemistry, but really this extends out to any science class. And so we can use some of this research and some of these ideas when we think about what makes us successful in taking an exam. So here's an exam. This is I call exams celebration of knowledge. What does this mean? You get your first test back and you get an A. Let me ask a question. Does it mean you get accepted to med school? Right? No, med schools are going to call you up. Oh, hey, you got an A on your first chemistry 111 exam at Wake Forest. We want you. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Okay? Does this mean that you had a panic attack? Chances are, probably not. Okay? Does it mean that you knew the material either beforehand or that you studied to learn it? At least what was on the test, right? You had to know something to get an A. So it probably means that. So we can actually make more inferences about this grade. You can say that you probably didn't have a panic attack. You can say you probably were a pretty careful test taker. You answered all the questions. You didn't make any silly mistakes. You knew how to use your calculator. And you studied the right stuff. Okay? What does that mean? C minus. Are you going to have any med schools calling you saying, don't ever apply at our school? Does that mean you can't get into med school? No, it doesn't. And we'll talk more about that next week. Okay, so I have two students come in. They both have the same grade. And I say, what can I do better? If I just see the grade, it means nothing to me. Because there are so many ways to get to that place. One student will answer every single question right until the last page, where the big question is. And they just run out of time. They were going too slow. They got everything right, but they just didn't answer the last question or maybe the last two questions, and so they get a C minus. The other student has answered every question wrong at some point. They got no question completely right. Just a little point here, a little point there. They weren't careful. They maybe forgot to answer part B of a question. They just weren't a careful test taker. Okay, so to help students think about like how do I improve, this score is actually by itself tells you nothing. And next week we'll talk more about how we interpret this score and get past a number. And say, okay, this told us something. It told us it's not where we want to be. That's pretty much all we can say. But how we want to get back to this is many different pathways for different people. So we're going to go into what makes this score. Okay? Okay. So, we said we'll give you a takeaway. I am going to give you a magic formula to ace any test. You think that's possible? Yeah? You guys want that, right? Miracles will happen. There it is. And it's not this, but I couldn't resist not putting a cat video in. Okay. It's not that. Okay? It is, there are 3 traits of a successful test taker. It's someone who has a strong cognitive domain that they're using information. So a cognitive domain, we'll kind of go through each one of these. Affective domain, this is, you can just change affective to attitude. Means the same thing. And test-taking skills. You need to have all 3 of these working together to do well on a test. And different people are going to have to work harder on different domains. Okay? And that's what you need to figure out. What your strengths and what your weaknesses are. So let's start off with a cognitive domain. So again, this is going to be knowing the content knowledge. Okay? It's going to be applying that knowledge. The affective domain is going to be a lot to do with anxiety. This is what really can... I think this attitude can help, but a lot of times we see it hurting in terms of these panic attacks, blacking out. It's also what confidence you bring into an exam. Again, too much confidence might be a bad thing, but you need to have something. Even if you don't think you should be confident, it does really help. And then what's your motivation? What's motivating you? Is it just grade, or is there something bigger than that, like learning, or knowing something for your next class or for your future career? These have all been shown in studies to give a really good predictor of student success. So for example, if you take out the cognitive domain, if you say, I'm going to take out all of your chemistry knowledge, and say, okay, if I remove all of that, if I have 2 students, they have different test scores, and I remove anything about their actual chemistry knowledge, studies have shown that the student who's more confident does better. Okay? A student who has a better attitude about chemistry. If you say, oh, I'm not a chemistry person, you're going to do worse. If you say, I can't do chemistry, you're going to do worse than someone says, I'm good at chemistry. And if you even just say, I'm good at chemistry, even though you don't think so, that's like a positive affirmation. You will do better. Okay? And studies have shown this. And then test taking is something that I still need to work on. Anyone who's seen any of my keys, Mary can probably tell, I have lots of errors. Even in the test that I write, I'm writing a key to my test, and I make mistakes. I mean, that's pretty bad test taking skills. Something I still need to work on. Okay? So a lot of that has to do with it. I normally write the keys really quickly late at night, and that's probably a reason I don't have that attention to detail. And again, doing things carefully, which generally involves practice. Okay? So that's what I mean by CATs. We have cognitive, affective, and test taking. So how does that work together? So to do well on a test, here's the formula. We have someone who is really confident, is a very calm person, doesn't get rattled much. Someone who's a very good test taker, very careful, has their calculator, they've used it before, but maybe they just didn't study the right stuff. The teacher's expectations weren't clear to them. And so, they have these 2 things going, but they just don't have the content knowledge or can't apply the content. So what grade do we think we get? Not A. Probably. I don't know what you could get. You could actually do pretty good if you have these 2. If you're a good test taker, especially. You can, some people probably in that situation. How many people in that situation were like, I don't really know, but you did okay? Anyone do that? Okay. So that was never me, but there are people who can kind of show up and do all right because they got these working for them. Okay. How about here? You really studied what you were supposed to study. You practiced. You're really confident. You know your stuff. You're intrinsically motivated. Maybe a little grade motivated extrinsically, but your calculator. Maybe you forgot your calculator to borrow a calculator, or maybe you just ran out of time. You didn't see the last page, or you just paced yourself wrong. You weren't used to taking a test that was like 5 pages or had a lot of writing. Okay, not A. I think you see where I'm going. So again, you know the stuff, you're a good test taker, but you have a panic attack. Not A. Okay? So the whole point here is that if you want to get an A, you got to do all three things. All three things have to be working. And generally what we're trying to do is one of these things is probably not your strength. Maybe multiple things. When I was a freshman, none of them were my strength. But I got better. So what you'll be doing throughout this semester and every semester is working on all three. And for some of you, it's going to really be maybe this one. Okay. I think everyone could probably be better at some of the test-taking skills. And then this will change how you get feedback from your instructor. Every instructor is going to give you different information. And that's where you kind of have to learn your teacher. So how do we improve these things? If you think, I'm not really good at getting feedback from my teacher. So one is to start early. Okay. And that means that you have enough time to get feedback. Go to your teacher. So if you start the night before, you can't really ask anyone. You're kind of on your own. So studying smart, I think it's really important. So I find a lot of students, including myself, I just try to memorize every problem and hope one of them are on the test. Has anyone ever had that mentality? Or had a friend? Anyone have a friend who has that mentality? Okay. So what happens? What's wrong with that when you get on a test and you don't, and none of those problems are there? You freak out, right? Oh, I don't know how to do anything. I memorized all these problems and none of the problems are on there. So whenever I give people practice tests, I intentionally don't put any of those problems on my exam. Okay? I want to see not how well you can memorize, but how well you can do something new and novel. So in chemistry, the most scary thing is a blank space. How many people are scared of a blank space? Anyone? I am scared of a blank space. Okay, so how do you get rid of the blank space? Write something down. Okay, anything. Just draw a picture. Label the variables. Anything. Just draw a picture of a cat. Doesn't matter. Just make it not a blank space anymore. You're moving forward. Okay? And so practice with a big, scary blank space. Put yourself in a testing environment. Take the practice test like it was a real test. And that gives you information about how quickly you need to move. And then it lets you practice these techniques that Dr. Cardi was talking about. If you're getting stressed out, practice them. Okay? A lot of times you don't practice the actual test-taking environment. So that's what I mean by studying smart. So expectations from the instructor. So what are good things? What are ways that we can tell what might be on the test? What the instructor feels is important? Does anyone have any? What types of? Where can we get this information? Yeah.
Just like quizzes.
Good. So a quiz or some type of assessment that the instructor's already given you. What's another one? Yeah.
Something that the instructor really emphasizes in class.
So if an instructor says, I think this is really important, guess what? Instructors like to test things that are really important, okay? And I'm fine saying this is important, put a test in there, because I want you to know it. At the end of the day, that's what's important. Some instructors won't be explicit, but if they've taken the time to write it down on the board, it's probably important, okay? When you ask an instructor, will this be on the test? Do you know how that makes the instructor feel? Do you think that makes the instructor feel good? What do you think that makes them feel like? What are you communicating when you say, will that be on the test? Yeah.
That you don't care about the actual content, just the grade.
Right, and that's just soul crushing for an instructor when we hear these things. We want to hear, is this important? Okay, you can ask that. You can say, is this something we should practice more? Okay, those are questions that you could ask an instructor. I give learning outcomes. Does any instructor give learning outcomes in your classes? Do we know what that's a fancy educational term? No one's heard of it? No one's heard of it? Okay. It's people who've had learning outcomes. Okay. So that's the very explicit way of saying this is what I care about. And that's what I'll test on. If your instructor doesn't do that, notes are really good, tests, practice exams, anything the instructor has given you that they've created. Okay. And this is, again, there's a point at which sleep's important. And I always like to say that it's like when you're going to run a marathon, do you run a marathon the night before? No, that's silly, right? You're going to be tired. You want to have maximum performance. Well, it turns out your brain needs sleep. And there's a certain point at which the law of diminishing returns, when you start studying late at night, what happens to your ability to really focus? Does it go up? Mine kind of goes up. I actually can focus at night. And then around 2 o'clock, what happens? Just crashes down, right? but you feel like, I need to study, and you're like, falling asleep. At that point, you need to go to bed because you're not really adding any value to your knowledge, but you're really hurting your test-taking performance because you're going to be tired the next day. Okay? So you might actually perform better on an exam because you can function at a higher level, even though you weren't able to practice those last things. And again, that goes back to starting early. The affective domain, so attitude, again, what we've talked about, minimizing anxiety and adrenaline, right? So when you get chased by a bear, where does all your blood go? What does adrenaline do? It doesn't make you a better thinker, does it? It makes you a really good fighter and runner, right? All the blood goes from your brain to your arms. Do you need to be flexed out on an exam? No, right? It does not help you at all. Okay? So you want to keep that blood in your brain and away from your extremities. And so trying to do these things, to be mindful, I think is really important. So I have an identical twin brother. We took a lot of the same chemistry classes together. And so we would have different testing kind of focuses. So I would come in, I would listen to calming music, just kind of get in my zone, not really talk to anyone. He would walk in listening to Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. Like, dun, dun, dun. And he would just listen to that before every single test, and that was how he got in his testing zone. Some people like to dress up because you look good, you feel good, right? How many people, anyone like to dress up for like, look good, feel good, right? Okay, I know more people want to raise their hand, but it's okay. So, and some people are like, I want to be comfortable. I'm going to go wear sweats, right? Okay? So it's really funny. I see like kind of half of people look like they're ready to go, do something. Every people look like they just woke up. And that's fine. You figure out what works for you to get you into the testing zone. I wore earplugs because that focused me. It allowed me not to focus on other things, other noises. And so I just wore earplugs. That was what I did. So figure out what works for you. A lot of the things that Dr. Cardi talked about, I found hard to do. But I found it really easy if I just exercised before an exam. Like I found this out by accident. I had an Aikido final right before a really hard math test. Like right before. And this instructor was like, it was brutal. Like I almost threw up. But I went right to my next class and I aced that final. Because I had the endorphins going, I was relaxed. Some people find that after the exercise, they get those going. And that's a great way, if you're not really good at kind of de-stressing or you're really stressful, just exercise before the exam. I found that really worked for me. Okay? It's kind of a little cheating. So get in your testing zone. What focuses you? Ask your instructor to wear noise-canceling headphones. I just have my students put the cord out, so I know it's not connected to anything. That's okay. So I think the other really important thing is how you perceive the test, the positive test mindset. So when I take a test, what I used to think was, oh, I hope I know this. I hope I know this. I hope the teacher doesn't ask these questions. So I always perceive the test as the instructor's trying to find out what I don't know. How many people have ever thought that about a test? They're trying to catch me, right, on something I don't know? Okay. So that is a very negative mindset. What's a better mindset? How can we flip that around? Anyone have an idea how we can flip that around? Yeah. I'm going to show the instructor what I do know. That's what I think when I write a test. Show me what you know, right? I give you every time. Show me what you know. And so instead of saying, I don't know how to do this entire problem, I'm going to show the instructor I know how to do half of it, right? I know what I should be doing. I can do a conversion, show it. Then I can give you credit if it's a blank space. That's the hardest part is when I see a blank space, I can give no credit. If you start writing down stuff, organizing things, drawing a picture, I can give you something. And it gets you going. It's this testing momentum. So having a different mindset will really help reduce that anxiety to begin with. Really, you've prepared. This is your time to shine. This is going to show your instructor what you know. However, and it may be not perfect. You might not know everything, but it really helps. Okay.
All right. So we have worked on our cognitive domain. We've studied for the test. We have worked on our minimizing our anxiety. We're in the zone. We've got a positive mindset. But the last thing that we need to focus on is test-taking skills. So I like to call something test-taking momentum, and that means that a test does not need to be taken in the order in which the problems are given. Some of the times I will write the easiest question first and the hardest question last, but not always. You can't assume that. And so a lot of students will take an entire test and look at the whole thing. So for organic chemistry, for example, the synthesis problem is generally at the end. So you can see what the problem is. And even if you don't know how to do it, you can say, well, now I'm looking for clues within the test. So it's a good strategy to use the test as a resource for information for other questions. So it's just kind of good to know what the hardest question is and kind of be aware of what information you might need to pick up from the test. It's also really important that you just start working on problems that you feel comfortable with. So that might be the first question, it might be the last question. And that way you're moving forward, you have momentum. So what you don't want to do, and the easiest way to run out of time on a test, is to spend too much time on one problem. So I tell my students that you should, if you're going to miss a problem, it's better to miss a problem and only take 5 minutes doing it than take 15 minutes and getting it wrong. So be able to cut your losses, be able to be okay to know that I'm not going to get 100% in every exam, but you're going to maximize the points. And you maximize the points by attempting every problem to the best of your ability and realizing when maybe you're spending too much time to answer that question. So it's also really important that you have the mindset that you want to show the instructor what you know. So you want to write down all of your work. If you leave a question blank, it tells the instructor that really nothing. I can't infer anything. But if you show them you could write a balanced chemical equation, you show them you can do the first calculation, I'm going to give you some points. So make sure you don't leave anything blank. Write something down. You can write something, and generally when you start writing something down, maybe it reminds you of, I needed to do the next step. So the blank space is the scariest thing in chemistry. So really try to get rid of that blank space as quick as possible. Drawing a picture. Just writing down information that's in the problem. And the last thing that a lot of students, the students who get A's are students who are generally have studied the right material. They are not anxious. They have a positive mindset, but they also are very careful. They're very careful at reading the question. They're very careful at doing the calculations, making sure they're not entering anything wrong in their calculator, and that when they write an answer, they check to make sure it makes sense. It's the right order of magnitude. So if you have a very, very large number and a very big unit, that's probably not correct. So being able to catch those in the test is really important. So being careful, I say read the question twice and answer it once. And so that's really what you want to do. So test taking skills are practiced. Some people are better at them. But really it's just a matter of practice taking a test before the actual test on a practice exam. And you can become, and this is actually one of the skills that every student becomes better at because you just take a lot of tests and you get better at these. So this is something initially might need some work on, but definitely something that you will get better at no matter what, because you'll be taking more tests. But the students who improve their testing skills faster are those who are very aware of maybe shortfalls in their test taking skills early on. All right, so now we know that we have, it's not just studying to do well on a test. There are other factors. It's your attitude, it's your test-taking skills. So now you go off into the world, take your first exam, and know that you've got this. And come to the next session, analyzing the exam in 2 weeks.